The sound of silence in the Miller house was never peaceful. It was loud with grief, heavy with unspoken pain, and brittle like a plate cracked but not yet broken. Ever since Rachel passed away 2 years ago, Jonathan Miller, a widowed father of 7, had been stumbling through life like a man lost in the fog. He tried to be strong, to fill the gap left by his beloved wife, cooking, cleaning, holding bedtime hands, wiping tears, but it wasn't enough. Not for the kids. And not for him. His once joyful home had become mechanical. Breakfast was cereal, lunch was sandwiches, and dinner sometimes just didn't happen. Laughter had been replaced by sighs. There were dishes always piled in the sink, mismatched socks everywhere, and the smell of burnt toast lingered more often than not. One Monday morning, as 4-year-old Ellie cried over cold oatmeal and 13-year-old Luke slammed the front door again, Jonathan sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. Something had to change. That's when he found her ad, small, tucked into the corner of a local bulletin board at church. Widow seeking cooking work. Experienced. Kind. Reliable. Grace Whitmore, 555-927-3434. He called that evening. Grace arrived on Tuesday morning. She was nothing like he expected. Tall, graceful, with soft eyes and silver-streaked hair tied neatly into a bun. She wore a faded blue apron, smiled gently, and carried a homemade apple pie. "I don't just cook meals," she said softly, as Jonathan awkwardly explained his situation. "I make homes feel warm again. I know what it's like to lose everything." Her husband had died in a car crash 3 years ago. They had no children. "But I've fed many," she added with a smile, her voice holding both sorrow and strength. Jonathan wasn't sure what to say. So he said yes. By Wednesday, the house smelled like cinnamon and butter. By Friday, laughter had returned to the dinner table. Grace didn't just cook food, she created moments. She baked Luke's favorite shepherd's pie after overhearing him talk about missing his mom's version. She taught 9-year-old Emily how to knead dough, turning their shared silence into giggles and flour fights. She sang hymns while chopping vegetables, filling the kitchen with music that reminded them all of something beautiful they'd forgotten. But it wasn't perfect. There were hard days. Luke resented her at first. He thought she was trying to replace his mom. "We don't need you," he snapped one evening. "You're not family." Grace didn't flinch. "I'm not trying to be your mom," she said, her voice steady. "I'm just here to help you remember what family feels like." Luke stormed out. That night, she packed an extra plate of dinner and left it on the porch. In the morning, the plate was empty. Jonathan watched it all with quiet awe. He started coming home earlier. He lingered longer at the table. He laughed more. But what stunned him most was how alive his children looked again. He hadn't realized how numb they'd become or how numb he had been. One evening, as they cleaned up after dinner, he asked Grace, "Why do you do this? You could have found an easier job." She paused, wiping her hands on her apron. "Because healing starts with nourishment," she said. I needed healing too. As months passed, Grace became more than a cook. She was a steady presence, a gentle soul, a friend. The kids began to confide in her, even Luke, who eventually asked her to come to his baseball game. And Jonathan? He found himself standing at the sink one evening, drying dishes as Grace washed them, thinking, what would life look like if she stayed? Not just in the kitchen, but in their lives. Every day. But he was scared. Would it be too soon? Too complicated? Then, one night, as the kids performed a little thank you skit they made for Grace, Ellie tugged at Jonathan's shirt and whispered, "Daddy, can Miss Grace be our new mommy?" Tears filled his eyes. He looked at Grace, her own eyes wide, her hand covering her heart. There were no fancy proposals. No grand declarations. Just slow, steady healing, one meal, one smile, one bedtime story at a time.